Well, you know the deal, strap in, this is gonna be a wild ride. Act 2 of Season 2 is out. And as always, it is packed full of Easter eggs and details you might have missed. Which means today, let's go through the entire Act 2 and let's pick up everything we can. While also putting everything into the context of the story. Also, it should be pretty obvious, this has spoilers for Act 1 and Act 2. On top of that, just know that it is impossible for someone to find all of the details. For example, a cool fact I missed in the previous act is that the core got corrupted by the blood which Victor coughed down in the first season. Also, we are recording this before Act 3 dropped, and here I do go on a bit of a crazy theory with Singed and Jace. So in case that gets proven wrong, just ignore that, the other facts should still be fine. But without further ado, let's get on it. Episode 4 starts with the Paint the Town Blue music video, where we get a quick catch-up sequence about all the rebels who started following Jinx. At the beginning, we can see all the enforcers putting up their new banners. This is technically a continuation of Caitlyn kinda becoming a dictator. A story arc that didn't get much use, did it? We then get a shot of the enforcers bothering the local Zonites. And here you can actually see a specific enforcer that comes back later. Next, they start putting up barricades as a checkpoint between Piltover and Zone. And over time you can see how Zonites get more and more frustrated. And it all ends with people starting to rebel. Now, if you are wondering why people would paint their hair blue, just like Jinx, you would not be the only one. That is something Arcane didn't answer that well. But essentially, the people of Zone knew about Jinx from all the posters the enforcers put up. They knew she was wanted for rebelling against Piltover. So naturally, that's who became the idol of the rebellion. I just wish Arcane got a bit more time to expand on this. Anyway, most of these screenshots are just people getting captured, but here, pay attention to their design. You'll see all of these come back later. And yes, it even teased that just as Mbessa promised, her army is also helping the enforcers. We then get a few shots of Mbessa and Caitlyn discussing their plans on how to handle the rebellion, after which it cuts to Mbessa wanting to push for more drastic measures. Which is why, directly after that, the wardens start shooting people. A cool detail here is that both the masks of the enforcers and the soldiers of the Noxus get their faces painted. This indicates that not only are they both on the same side, but they are both equally hated by Zone. In this shot, you can see that the Noxian soldiers now wear the same logo as the enforcers, further hinting that this new logo is just a merging between the Kiraman family and the Medardas. Of course, just as this rebellion is going on, the enforcers are still looking for Jinx, which is why this scene specifically is covered in question marks. And to get their answers, they started beating people up. Once they are done, they will take them all in. And this is actually part of the same continuity. Notice that they are taking them away in the cable cars that pop up later on. And once they are taken away, sometimes Mbessa gets personally involved in the interrogations. But it's not enough, they still can't find Jinx. And so here, you can see her frustration at Caitlyn's incompetence. This then goes to Caitlyn obviously being frustrated too. And we can see she puts everything on her board to figure it all out. A cool detail here is that all the pins lead into Jinx's eye. Not only is this a general reference to Jinx's shimmer eyes being her strength, but this is also a callback to just Jinx's eyes always being called out in Season 1. And unfortunately, I don't think we can get anything else from this board. But then, in the middle of all the flashes of rebellion, we also see this scene, which is a mural that is actually slightly different from the one Vi finds in Zone later on. This sequence then ends with Isha being covered in Jinx's tags, foreshadowing that she is kinda taking her place. And here, she can be found painting the very same mural we just mentioned. What we can point out here is that while it would be cool if those wind lines on the sides were a reference to Janna, who also became a Zonite idol, here it is most likely referencing the blue smoke that came from painting the town blue, and other colors. Also, of course, Jinx is standing in a very similar pose to the one she had when she held up the torch. And even here, the blue flag kinda mimics the smoke coming from it. So next, the scene cuts to Caitlyn's room, where Maddie was revealed to be with Caitlyn romantically. Now, we could assume that this is just a one-night stand, or we could assume it is a week-long stand. The truth is, at least for now, this scene did not really get much of a point. So it seems Fortiche were just down to see the world burn for fun. And they were ready to catch the Kate Vi fandom imploding. Props to them for going into such a bold war. The real point of this scene is that Caitlyn couldn't sleep. because the Noxians are more and more aggressive in their self-defense. Caitlyn would be willing to call the armies off, but not without Jinx. At the very least, they had to get her before building a new council. Remember, it was personal since Jinx technically killed her mother. So then, Caitlyn leaves and the world is left in chaos. The scene then cuts to Jinx announcing a glorious battle in the arena, where we can see the lights form Jinx's iconic smile. And she announces that the fighters would be Stinkmaw, kinda referencing the Void Herald from League, and Scuttlebutt, obviously referencing Scuttlecrab from League 2. And the fun fact here is, after the latest patch, both of them are actually in League. What's awesome is that in this scene you can also hear an epic version of the Rise song. And then it is revealed that the two big monsters were just bugs. The first thing we can notice here is that since the last act, Isha fully took on Jinx's clothing. She has her vest, her striped pants, and even the painted tattoos. The bunny ears, I'm not really sure what those are referencing, though she is kinda sitting like a rabbit here. We then go to this wide shot, which revealed we are back in Jinx's original basement. And all the references from the first season are still here. This includes all the different monkeys, a drawing of Silco, some weird voidy drawings, I wonder if those are a foreshadowing now. And next to those, she still has the carousel, which is referencing Jinx's original Get Jinxed video. However, the other corner of this place has been entirely rebuilt. If you look at this old image from Season 1, you can see she used to have a rhino here, that was also a reference to the Get Jinxed video, and this is also where she used to have the mannequins of Milo and Clagger. But now, that entire area was rebuilt into Isha's home. In the next shot, Isha then opens up Jinx's old box. This one also appeared in Season 1. And you can see it still does have the wings, which are a reference to the light and dark companions of Jinx's Star Guardian skin. This is also when it was confirmed that Isha is mute, as she is using a sign language. But of course, Isha won their bug duel, and so her reward was getting her hair painted by Jinx. That's why she pulled out the wanted poster. So next, we get a shot of their new girly makeup corner. Before, this used to be Jinx's workbench. For example, this is where she worked on Hextech, and this is where she made all the explosive butterflies. But now, it is no longer used for making explosives. And here, you can see the scene skips the entire process of painting Isha's hair. Now, I don't wanna skip ahead, but this scene does get referenced later on at the end of this act. Also, if you are wondering why this mirror is cracked, it's because it is a callback to Season 1, where Jinx returned from her encounter with Vi for the first time. This is when Jinx mentions that she didn't really get to do these things with Vi, and with her blue hair, Isha immediately starts posing like Jinx. After this, Isha actually got to build her first explosive gadget, mimicking powder in Season 1. And what's interesting here is that just as Jinx said that she used to have a different name back then, the two line up next to each other, and Jinx really hints that Isha is who Powder once was. After which she disassembles the gadget, hinting that with Isha around, Jinx is down to enjoy the girly life and be done with explosives. After which they do their little greeting sign, and Isha reaches into Jinx's box of memories. Here she pulls out her gun, which is safe for her to do because it was destroyed by Caitlyn, who shot it in the last episode. But besides that, you can see some other items from previous episodes. You can see the fireworks and the horse from the carousel. This specific one was actually stolen from Jace's lab in episode 1. You can see the breathing mask that she had when she tied Savika up. And you can see two other things that were stolen from Jace's lab. There is the invention, which Powder said comes from an inventor known as Valdiani, and we can see the original board that was used for Hextech calibrations. Isha then gave the gun to Jinx and asked her to fix it. Of course, here you can see the hole from Caitlyn's shot. And Jinx threw it away, telling her that that was her past life. She even tells her that Jinx is dead. And as she does so, she reveals fish bones. Or at least a part of it, because it did blow up. And the interesting thing is, which also might be foreshadowing for Act 3, is that here she didn't even bother to fix it. So with Jinx not willing to join the rebellion, Isha hints at doing it herself. So the next shot then goes to the Stillwater Hold, where we can see the same cable cars that were used to take away the rebels, which is where it is revealed that inside the hold, Mbessa is experimenting with Hextech on her own. Of course, without someone like Heimerdinger or Jace, she had to get her own scientists. And so, Mr. Goatman is the one who was asked to do it. Here, they are actually trying to do the same experiment that Jace and Victor did in Heimerdinger's lab in Season 1. It's the one scene where they started floating. And so here, the scene directly mimics that process. They even got a more advanced setup of what Jace had in that episode. Of course, first we get the runes flying around, and then the scientist is actually floating just like Jace and Victor. But then it explodes, revealing that no one can match Jace's experience with Hextech. This is where Ambessa gets mad. And it is suggested that she also believes that the Black Rose are behind the disappearance of Jace and Heimerdinger too, mentioning she thinks that the Black Rose are afraid of Hextech, which could be true, especially in Ambessa's hands, but also they would be interested in it for their battle against Mordekaiser. Then the scene goes back to the checkpoint, where Rictus arrived to do a checkup on suspected rebels. And we get to see Scar in the crowd, witnessing some more Noxian brutality. This is how the Firelights first learned about this. Which is when, even though we all thought it would be Jinx in the trailers, it ended up being Isha who arrived to cause a bit of a mayhem. And the timing couldn't be better, because she arrived just as Rictus told the rebels that Jinx is hiding while everyone else is suffering. Anyway, when Isha arrives, we can see the gadgets she built at Jinx's lair falling down. All these really do is explode into a smokescreen. So then the local Zonites grab at the opportunity and they run through the enforcers. Though that did not stop Rictus from performing some more brutality. So next we cut into the Caraman house. You can see their family logo behind the fireplace. Here Caitlyn is adding the new evidence onto her board, which includes Isha's bomb, and Caitlyn doesn't doubt it is Jinx's. Then the shot looks up, and you can see the magnifying glass focusing on Jinx's eye, which is where all the pins have been piling up. Weirdly enough, we can't see the pins in the large image, although it is cool to see Jinx's eye constantly overlapping with Caitlyn's eye. So then, Ambessa arrives and sneakily calls Caitlyn out for having an affair with Maddie, but mainly she arrived to tell Caitlyn that she found a trail leading to Jinx. But Caitlyn is hesitant to follow it because it would only cause more violence. Which is when Ambessa tells her that she will never rest while knowing she is out there, possibly referencing LeBlanc going after her in the same way. Though this may have some deeper connections to the story with Kino, because she also tells Caitlyn she possibly has the strength to forgive, which she didn't. If you go back to what the Black Rose said in the previous act, where they suggested Ambessa should have given up on the feud long time ago, maybe Ambessa was chasing something she shouldn't have. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was a setup for the Ambessa book. Anyway, next we get to Salo, who is just a wreck now. Not only is he getting more and more drunk, but the bags under his eyes are getting bigger, and he is getting more addicted to Shimmer. So our friendly spy, who is taking care of him, tells him about the mysterious healer down in the fissures, who is, of course, Victor. So yes, the setup from Act 1 really did lead up to this. So then, Savika appears for the first time, and we can see she fixed herself up. Not only does that mean a new hairstyle and new clothes, but her arm was also stripped of some of the unnecessary inventions, such as the speaker, the fireworks, and the score count. Though the Gamba mechanic still stayed. Here Savika tells Jinx that everyone in Zone thinks she is back, but she has no idea what Savika is talking about. This gets Isha excited because she knows what she did had an impact. So Savika asks Jinx to at least show up during their gathering, but she refuses, while trying to show her the middle finger. She then turns around and possibly starts working on her new finger. As she does this, she mimics a scene from Season 1 with the magnifying glass. Except Savika is now replacing Silco. So Savika then slams the table in frustration, saying she should do it for Silco, which is when Jinx got some minor flashbacks. This scene then ends with Savika saying that she is gathering up everyone, no matter if they are Jinx's fans or the Firelights, and she mentioned Jinx's fantasy won't last forever. By this, she is referring to Jinx living a happy life with Isha, which is where we get a closer shot of her. Her hat is now painted, and it has a cross across one eye. I wonder if this is now hinting towards Moldiver from TFT. But really, this made me realize something. I think I was right in Act 1 when I doubted that the hat was referencing Teemo. In reality, I think Isha is a clever reference to Ziggs, who also had rounded red goggles, because in the original lore, Ziggs became Jinx's friend in Zone. Anyway, for one last time, Jinx then looks into the mirror. However, she does not line up her eye with the hole, which is what she did in Season 1 all the time. And yes, next to the mirror we have a heart with Jinx and Isha. So next, Jinx visits Silco's office, and she talks to that Silco. In a way, this is a parallel to how Silco went to Vander's statue to vent about his future too. And while there, Silco talked about the fathers and their daughters, here Jinx was venting about her finally having a friend she cares about. In the next scene, we can see Caitlyn visiting the memorial of the counselors. And here, Caitlyn puts a candle down to honor her mother. But at the same time, we can see Scar placing down a candle for Echo, who is still missing, so he was put on the mural of all the Firelights. Not only did they also draw one of the Firelight bugs above him, since he was their leader, but also there is an interesting nod to Echo's future power to deal with time right next to him. Here, I have to say, they should have also put Heimerdinger up there, I guess they forgot about him. Also yes, that is a tiny doll of Teemo at the bottom. The shot then goes up the tree, and you can see it is not as lush as it once used to be. It is still losing leaves. So Savika then visits Vander's statue ahead of the meeting, which is a powerful moment because the last time she got to speak with Vander, she told him he looked weak, and now he became an icon again. And finally, it all goes back to Caitlyn, who after visiting her mother looked at Maddie. And without a single word, that scene told us what Caitlyn was about to do. She would honor her mother's original vision, and she would do what Maddie told her to do. She would try to dial the Noxian army back and take everything back into her own hands. Which is when it cuts into Rictus beating up the rebel he picked up at the checkpoint. And he learned there was gonna be a meeting at the statue. So the meeting was about to start. We can see even Jericho stopped serving his guests, which, in case you missed it, that is Harold, the janitor from the academy, and the guy who did all the inspections for the Zeppelins. And so Jericho closes his stand and attends the meeting too. During this setup, you can see people spraying all over the Enforcer propaganda. And as they spray over Caitlyn, the line happens to drip down like tears at her eyes. Then it cuts to the meeting itself. And here I notice these posters on the side. One of them says Oliver, and the other two also have names. I wonder if these are a reference to the animators at Fortiche or something like that. Anyway, the crowd is full of people you may recognize. And even here we can already see Jericho. Besides that, there is Babette, a Yordle you might also recognize. Singed is walking behind Jericho there. The Firelights are present too. Jinx's followers were revealed to be called Jinxers, which I guess means the original Ink's name was retconned now. But also the goons of Margot and Crows are here together, despite hunting each other in the last act. And that's because I totally missed it, but Crows and Margot are dead. It was shown in this screenshot. And of course, that is when everyone starts wondering where Jinx is. So Isha comes out to light up the torch and unite them all. And in this shot you may also find some more interesting characters. For example, this fishy lady with the mohawk looks like the one that Vi beat up in Season 1 to get her jacket, which could be just Fortiche reusing models for the crowds. But in the front you can also see the local arena master who comes back later. And that is when Noxus arrived. With Rictus once again showing his perfect throw. The last time he did this, he executed a big tank. And here he destroyed Savika's new arm. So she detaches from the arm, and the Noxian army goes in to break up the gathering. This ends up with more of the rebels being taken in. For example, pay attention to this one. Also, the Firelights get captured, and so Isha decides to be a hero and jump at Rictus. She doesn't do much damage and gets captured too. Which is when the Enforcers go in and get singed. But he manages to cut his own hand first, which is something he did to wake up Warwick. Now, if you are wondering why would Warwick react to Singed's blood specifically? Well, remember that in Act 1, he funneled his own blood into him, which is why the two are likely linked now. And of course, as Warwick is waking up, you can hear his champion theme in the background. What's awesome is that as he is waking up, you can see the Chemtech injector rising on his back, priming up to awaken the beast. In fact, you'll see that every single time he is asleep, this especially happens in Act 3, the injector is just sleeping inside his body. Next, the shot goes back into Jinx's hideout. Here we get a better shot of the new work desk. In the background we can see the tail fin of Fishbones. And in the foreground we can see Pow Pow, the machine gun that Vi destroyed in episode 6. When Jinx arrives, she mentions she is ready to find out who's the new Pebbleweight champion. By this, she is referencing the Bug Battle rematch. She notices that Isha is not here, so she thinks she is hiding, which is where we get a bit more detailed shot of Isha's little house. Once again, that is the same couch where Jinx previously had Milo and Clagger's mannequins. But then Sevika comes in, and she finds out her friend, who is the only human being that kept Jinx sane, was gone. So Jinx starts going psycho again. And right as she gets into the state, she starts hearing voices calling her Jinx. This includes the voice of Silco. So at the end, I guess Jinx is not as dead as she thought. During this scene, as more memories come up, you have 4 figures surrounding Jinx. Red one is Clagger, blue is Milo, green is Silco, and pink is Vi. And the yellow is Sevika, I guess, because next to her we can also see Isha here. And at the end, it all awakens Jinx's purple eyes again. The scene then goes into the cable car taking people into the Stillwater hold, where we can see Isha standing next to Singed. Who knows, they wouldn't be staying long. As he says that, the POV goes to Warwick, where we can see him run out of Singed's lab, he drops into the streets of Zaun, and he rushes to Vander's statue, which is where the gathering happened. This is why here not only can we see the drops of Singed's blood, that's the scene where they captured him, but also you can see the line, which is the stench of the blood. That is obviously referencing Warwick's in-game ability. And yes, Warwick then looks up at the statue of Vander and he doesn't actually recognize himself. So then he starts following the trail to the Stillwater hold. And that's when we get to Jinx and Sevika breaking in. Here we immediately get a clever line. Jinx calls Sevika a lefty after joking that she can't swim. This is a continuation of her conversation with that Silco. There she said that her clever comebacks are not what they used to be ever since she met Isha. But now, without Isha, her jokey side is back in full swing. So they surprise an enforcer who didn't believe that Jinx was Jinx, we get a joke about torn up pants, and Jinx gets dressed like an enforcer. Here, I'll be honest, Riot, if you don't turn this into a skin in the game, I'm gonna be very disappointed. This almost feels like a no-brainer. Anyway, one of the enforcers makes a move on Jinx and we get to see her new middle finger. So next, our favorite jailer is back, who calls Sevika her nickname, Big Mama. The interesting thing here is, all the documents the jailer is now stamping, which were previously stamped with the mark of Piltover, are now being stamped with the new Enforcer logo. And that's when Ambassa and Jinx get their first meeting. For a moment, Jinx considers shooting her, and here it zooms in on the gun, where I never noticed the valve actually had a smiley face on it, but at the end, nothing came out of this encounter. And then, as Jinx and Sevika keep going, something weird happens. In literally the next shot after encountering Ambassa, when the two get into the elevator, you can see Jinx's gun is now missing the valve. We even get a zoom in on it for the second time, and now you can see the clear difference. The valve is gone. What's even funnier is that after they leave the elevator, which literally happens in the next few frames, the valve is back. Like, that's a mistake, right? Does that mean that Fortiche are but mortal men? Have they actually made a mistake? Well, no, they are not mortal men. Because while this is technically a mistake, this is a calculated mistake that was done on purpose. They needed a cool shot of Jinx holding the gun sideways to have a close-up on her slotting in the gem. And if the valve was there, she couldn't hold the gun like this. So Fortiche literally made a mistake on purpose to give us a cool artistic shot. Anyway, you can notice that the slot for the gem is marked with the precision rune from the game. This makes sense because Jinx is an AD carry in League of Legends. And remember, this is still in line with how the runes work, because originally the hexcore was marked with all the runes at once. Also, she used the hole from Caitlyn's shot to make this hextech chamber. Regardless, she then slots in the gem. A really cool detail is that here, just as Sevika is taking off her collar, we get another shot of Warwick rushing in, referencing how the chains are being taken off. And after the hextech gem is slotted into the pistol, we finally get what is known as Zappy in the game, the final form of Jinx's gun that is empowered by hextech. Then we go back to Warwick and we can see how he sliced someone's neck, after which it goes to Sevika cracking her neck. Next we get a shot of the enforcers down there, and we get to see that they are playing the Piltover version of Tellstones, even though some of the stones actually have the Demacian logos. Specifically, one of the enforcers is performing the move where you can take a peek at one of the stones. Long story short, Tellstones is a real board game that is canonically played all over Runeterra. Especially Demacia has a lot of traditions around it. And what's awesome is that you can actually get a real physical version of this game too. But of course, these two get knocked out, and Jinx frees the followers. Here, she expected some cheering and roaring, but instead she got a kind of respected thanks, which she didn't expect. What's awesome is that all of these followers are the same people who not only got captured at the gathering, but also you may remember some of them from the very first shot in the music video. Also, this lady was pinned on Caitlyn's board. And as these people are walking by Jinx, the theme of the bridge plays in the background. But among these, we can also see the firelights. Here's the girl with the mask that has a long beak, and here's Scar. And yes, Babette was here too. In this zoom in, we can also see that Jinx has a monkey carved onto the hair decorations, and in the next scene, we can see Mbessa who realized that something was wrong. She wanted to go back and check up on the prisoners, but she got interrupted by the coming of Warwick. Not only can you once again hear his theme here, but also it is possibly a very subtle reference to Warwick's original cinematic. It's the one where the main character was trying to escape him using a cable car, but it ended up with Warwick leaping onto him. Kinda a very similar deal to what's happening here. Another detail is that here, the beating of the door heavily resembles the sounds of drums, after which Mbessa puts on her battle mask. And so she prepares for a fight. Back in the prison, Jinx finally finds Isha and frees her. And when the two hug, we get to hear the very same theme we heard at the very beginning of Arcane, where Vi and Powder climbed above the city, hinting that Jinx now took the place of her older sister. But of course, the last prisoner here is Singed, who knew that Warwick would be coming for them. So he locked himself inside his cell to possibly save himself. But as he hides in the corner, he leaves a bloody print on the door. Of course, it didn't take long, and after the enforcers arrived, so did Warwick. The really strange thing here is, when the shot goes to Singed's cut hand, we can hear a woman exhaling in the background. I wonder if that was supposed to be some kind of foreshadowing for his daughter, or if it was just artistic ambience. So then, Warwick gets out of the elevator and slams the ground. The reason why I am pointing this out is because this is a detail that comes back later. We can also see that when the spike injects the Chemtech into his body, Warwick goes red. And that's when he gets bloodthirsty, which is where we get another POV. And here we learned that Warwick can see the heartbeat of the people as well as their veins. However, the trail he was following went behind the enforcers. So next, all the enforcers die, but Jinx quickly manages to shoot him first. She realizes that her hextech gun doesn't do much, so she orders Savika to run out with Isha, so she can be the big fat hero. Which is where we get the fight of Warwick versus Jinx. Savika then manages to get out, where they can see all the carnage. Here, we have to point out, our favorite jailer is dead. Back in the fight, Jinx pulled out Chomper. This is not the best news, because so far, every time she had done so, she was ready to die. An example of this would be the fight with Echo. Although there was a scene in Season 1 where she was actually trying to properly use it as a weapon. That was at the Zeppelin. But here, we are talking about a scene similar to Echo, because she was ready to pull the pin again, but she got stopped, which saved her life. And that's when, after seeing the gadget, Warwick realized that's Powder. Because he is Vander, of course. And as he realized that, the bridge theme was playing in the background once again, referencing how Vander originally adopted them on the bridge. Also, this brought back a piece of his humanity, but his eyes are still blue and green, because Singed infused him with the essence of the Merkwolf, which had blue and green eyes. I'm saying this is what happened because alternatively he just poked his eyes out and gave him the wolf's eyes. So you know what, take that for what you will. But this takes us to episode 5. Here we get the fighting scene that originally appeared in a trailer. So here's a speedrun of this part. Not knowing what to do without Caitlyn, Jinx or the enforcers, Vi defaults back to what she liked doing, punching people. So she fought in the Piltover Boxing League. And she's fighting Gustav the Scowler Jowler, a guy whom you may remember as the one Vi knocked out in episode 1 of season 1. Later in the same season, she also destroyed his jaw in a prison, which is why Gustav now has a metal jaw. And now, she got to fight him for the 3rd time. Of course, Loris is there in the background. And you can see he's holding a betting ticket with Vi's logo. Also, the arena is ran by the same guy who was at the gathering. And when Gustav cheers, the crowd cheers with him, holding his betting tickets. You can tell it is his because it has the jaw on it. Of course, Vi instantly knocked him down with one punch, and once again, she broke his jaw. So then, in this music video, we learned about Vi's new side story arc. It starts slow with Vi and Loris celebrating their first victory at the bar, but then she starts fighting more, she beats more people, gets paid more, and she spends it all back at the bar. So she's really just getting more and more drunk. Also, she got a new persona at the arena. There, she's kinda known for being emo. And the reason why she's really doing all of this is to vent her frustration. But as she keeps winning in the crowd, we can see more and more people betting on Vi. And in fact, we can also see Jinx's hand in the crowd also betting on her. When it comes to the opponents, we went through all of these in a separate video when we looked at the trailer. And unfortunately, there is nothing really that interesting here besides the one guy who seemingly has Ionian mask. That is, unless he's actually somehow tied to the Black Rose. But as we mentioned, Vi gets progressively more and more wasted, and her room gets covered in more and more bottles. So, after they are done at the bar, Loris now suddenly has to get Vi into her room. And as they are getting there, Vi sees the new Enforcer banners that remind her of Caitlyn, which is further fueling her rage. As a fun fact, just remember, meanwhile, Caitlyn is with Maddie. Yeah, so Vi completely loses it. She starts partying more, and she almost gets kissed by one of Silco's former goons. But Vi punches him and Loris breaks them up. But not before Vi shows him the middle finger, which is kinda a callback to a scene from season 1. But after this, the two stop celebrating together, Vi refuses his help, she stays alone, and of course, Jinx is there to witness it all. She then starts going drunk into the arena too, and naturally she starts losing her fights. From that point on, Loris' spot in the crowd is taken by Jinx, and at the end of this, after Vi wakes up in her room, I'm not sure how she got there besides Loris helping her, but she sees Caitlyn for a moment. This is a parallel scene to season 1, where the two laid on Caitlyn's bed. And after she gets up, she can see Jinx painting her own name on her face, just like Vi. Which is making fun of not only that, but also how she's putting on her persona makeup. Now here, before we move on, I got a bit of a fun fact for you. Apparently, in this scene, Riot accidentally used the wrong version of the song. They used the demo version where the lyrics were completely different from what it was supposed to be. So now, we kinda have to wait and see if they can somehow fix it together with Netflix to give us the full version. Anyway, still full of rage. The first thing Vi does here is grab her by the neck. Jinx tries to tell her that Vander is alive, and while being choked, you can see Jinx's tears are pink from the shimmer in her eyes. But eventually Vi releases her, and after calming down a bit, we can see a shot of Vi in front of the mirror. Here, notice how this episode is mostly focusing on Vi, and so here we can see her reflection in a cracked mirror. In the previous episode, which was all about Jinx, there was a parallel shot of this. Except her life in the reflection of a broken mirror was a lot better than this. So next, the scene goes to Mbessa after she fought with Warwick. How did she survive? I'm still not sure. Possibly because she's the chosen of the wolf, so death saved her again. Which also makes it ironic that Mbessa fought Warwick, but looking at Mbessa, you can see she doesn't have any big scars, besides the one scratch on her nose which was behind the mask. So it's possible she just didn't draw any blood. We can then see Caitlyn walking into the scene. Fun fact here, the last time we saw Caitlyn walking into this place was when she was here to free Vi in season 1. Since then, not much has changed, but the jailer was alive. I love how you can see the utter shock in Caitlyn's eyes here. She had probably never seen this much death before. In the following scene, which is the one where she gets down, we get an awesome callback to Caitlyn's first ever investigation. That was the Zeppelin with the Shimmer shipment, where Caitlyn was essentially reenacting the entire scene. Well, here she is doing it again. She imagined how Warwick slammed his claw down after he got out of the elevator. I told you that scene would come back. She imagined how he killed all the other enforcers. And that led her to the trial of blood, where Singed locked himself up. And this is the point where I would like to ask, just what exactly was Singed's plan? To distract the guards and get out? I don't think that would happen. This scene makes it sound like he had to have a way to calm Warwick down. Otherwise, I doubt the cell would have saved him. And so, the awesome interrogation of Singed begins. And here we can see all the items that were in his possession. There's the scalpel, which he used to draw blood, the injector he used to subjugate Silco, all his notes about Warwick's skull deformation. There's also what I believe are the duplicating cells hinting at regeneration, but also his augmented heart, which doesn't actually look like the twin heart of the Merkwolf. At least, not from this perspective. And there were countless different green vials, all of which Singed actually carries around. The rounded flask goes on his back, and the vials is what he carries in the pouch on the front. So literally every item you can see here are things he actually carries physically on him. But yeah, I wonder if any of this would have been enough to stop Warwick eventually. So during this interrogation, Caitlyn fails to get anything out of Singed. And so the scene cuts to Mel. Everything that's happening here is pretty much just one massive trick done by the Black Rose. From the possibly fake bugs to Mel coughing out the rose petals, to a vision of Elora getting killed. We are still not entirely sure what really happened here. And I'll be honest, it is hard to get anything out of this scene because it is related to the Black Rose. It can be just one massive illusion. But still, let's try. In this weird cell, she meets Kino, her long-lost brother. From Ambassa we learned that he was likely killed by the Black Rose, so it makes sense that she would find him here. And throughout this scene, he keeps hinting at the stewards of the old world. Which again, this could be just pre-Noxian era Black Rose, and apparently they were in an ocularum, a room built by the Ancients, which they used to seal away false prophets. By the Ancients, I'm gonna assume he's actually referring to living Mordekaiser era of Noxus, because he could also refer to something even older, like the Vastai Shirei war with the Titans or something like that. But that's a story for another time, I guess. Which is when we cut back to Jinx and Vi, who are now on surprisingly friendly terms. And here Vi witnessed another mural in Jinx's honor. Here we can see Jinx following Vander's example, or so the people believe, holding up fists just like the people did during the gathering, with birds of freedom around her, as the city of Piltover is getting covered in colored smoke, referencing the end of Act 1. And so the group gets into the Clappy Mushroom Mine. Name, work in progress. As they go in, you can see the claw marks all around the mine. And soon they start questioning why Vander would go down here in the first place. Which is followed by Vi saying that all of this is another one of Jinx's delusional fantasies. She did this in reference to Isha not knowing how delusional Jinx was, which directly mimics how Sevika told Jinx that she can't live in her fantasies with Isha forever. Jinx then jokes to Isha that Vi actually used to be cool before she kicked her butt, and Vi took it personally. So the two started a banter about each other's past lives. Vi said she wouldn't last 1 second without her gadgets, and Jinx said she wouldn't either without her gauntlets. So Vi dropped them down. As she did, the sound of them falling down lit up all the mushrooms. The room then dimmed down again, before Jinx slapped her within that 1 second. And that made the mushrooms light up again. So the two started a fight, and Jinx called her Fat Hands, directly referencing a taunt she has against Vi in the game. In this scene, just notice how it keeps dimming down and lighting up with every hit. And of course, it all ends with Isha getting knocked, after biting Vi, because she's good at that, I guess. So we get a quick scene of Jinx taking care of her as an older sister would, but unfortunately at that point Isha left behind a bloody print. And here Vi is just surprised that Jinx could even care about someone like that. Not to mention that this is what Vi and Jinx could have had. So next they get to a splitting path, so Isha runs ahead to explore one of them, which leaves Jinx and Vi alone. A perfect opportunity for Vi to ask Jinx why she asked her to join them. Jinx then gives back a reference to Season 1, because she says the last time Vander needed them, they did it alone, and nothing was ever the same. Of course, this is talking about the finale of Act 1, where Vi told Jinx to stay back home, as the rest went to save Vander, and at the same time, later, Powder went in alone too. So to Jinx, this was kind of a do-over. Also, she adds that Vander is her father too. Which, just to remind you, Vander is their adoptive father. So next the scene goes back to Singed, but this time he is alone with Ambassa. Here, Ambassa mentions that she fought battles from the Blood Cliffs to the Dalamore Plain. both of which are places we can find on the map. Blood Cliffs are to the east of Noxus, and Dalamore Plain is on the other side, northwest of Noxus, where we can find someone like Kled, for example. I wonder if she ever met him. After which, she gave Singed the offer to work for her. She would finance all of his experiments, but in return, she would require him to make weapons. This is an incredibly important story moment for the history of League's universe, because we always knew that Singed is a crucial component in Noxus launching their invasion of Ionia. Singed is the one who made all of the devastating chemicals for Noxus, which destroyed half of Ionia and angered all the spirits. The lore of the entire world literally just snowballs from that. So the entire Arcane, there were a lot of people who are waiting to see if this gets retconned, or if Arcane honors one of the most iconic moments of League's lore. And I am so happy they did. Which is why, to any lore nerd, this scene was great. After accepting this offer, Singe tells Mbessa that Warwick used to be a man, a victim of a great tragedy. He looks at the locket with his daughter when he says that, hinting how Vander's life too was entirely resolving around his daughters. After this, Singed continues that he had a ferocious will to live, and an incredible tolerance to pain. As he says this, we once again get the POV of Warwick, who is still somewhere down there in the mines with Jinx and Vi now. However, what Singed said was actually a really cool reference to the old lore. In the old story, the reason why Singed was able to create Warwick in the first place is because he found a man who had a tolerance to pain so great he could survive the transformation. In fact, he later references this again, when he mentions the different catalysts for the transformation, which is a quote directly paying respect to the source material. Anyway, as he said, Warwick allowed him to make progress, which is when we see Singed holding the green tank that is on his back, but for a few frames it transforms into his daughter. This might be heavily hinting that Singed is injecting an essence of his daughter into Warwick. This seems to be the case because if you know Singed's old lore, that's what he would do. Throughout his history, he had a lot of different horror stories where he essentially blended multiple people together, and he was trying to make the more fragile ones survive. So, an experiment where he's injecting a piece of a dying person into something that can survive makes sense. In fact, these references to the source materials continue as Singed says that he could make the body survive, but the mind would be lost. This is a direct reference to the short story about Singed called The Host, where he tried to save a fragile smart man by sewing his body onto a strong dumb person, which would make him survive because of the strong body, but the mind of the clever man would break eventually. So, you know what? Great job at paying respect to the old Singed, Riot. Anyway, here we get a bunch of flashbacks from Vander's mind about the bridge. We can see he and Silco fought the Enforcers with flaming cocktails. This is also interlaced with images of the monkey, which I'm still not sure how that is relevant, because this is not the one with the Hextech crystal. After which we get the image of Silco standing above the body of Vi and Jinx's mother. This is possibly hinting at some kind of misunderstanding. Then there is a quick flash of Vander hitting an Enforcer with his gloves. This might be the very same scene from the opening of Arcane. After which it cuts to Vander as Warwick still killing Enforcers. Here, Singed said that he is now entirely driven by the scent of blood. However, as Powder pops up, he adds he is yet to uncover the right catalyst. Once again, this is a direct reference to his old lore where Singed was looking for the catalyst for the transformation. He thought the catalyst would be pain, which is why high tolerance would be crucial. But that transformation was flawed. But Powder revealed that for a transformation that kept the subject human, there had to be something else. Which is where we get the first tease of their past lives. We got a glimpse of their mother again. But then Vander blinks and she's gone. The camera then goes to Silco, again hinting he might have been responsible for her death. Though things get more easily pieced together a bit later. The more important thing here is, notice his eye has not been treated by Shimmer yet. We know he got it after he fought Vander, and it was from all the toxins in the river mixing up with his blood. That's why the wound looks so bad here. And here we can simply hear Silco say, blisters and bedrock, foreshadowing that these words are tied to the death of their mother. And you'll see how in just a moment. The scene then transitions with Warwick slashing across him. And we get back to Mel in her prison. Here, Mel talks about how everyone believed that Kino was dead. And then, without even controlling her own hand, which you can see is the case because even Mel herself is surprised, she started figuring out how to escape this room. In a way, I wonder if this is what the Black Rose are trying to figure out. Maybe they want to know what this room is. And it is possible that they know Mel can do that, which is why they brought her here. Anyway, Mel asks Kino about how she got here, which is where Kino gave us a bit of a story drop. We learned that he had some work to do in Basilic, which again is a place we can find on the map. And as a fun fact, Basilic is the hometown of Darius and Raven. But Kino heard rumors that their mother fell in love in a random town, and the affair led to a child. And apparently, that child inherited something powerful. We now know he is probably talking about the powers of being the chosen of the wolf, though at that point he is saying that as if they don't know which one of them is the special child. As he says that, I quickly want to point out, I am pretty sure Mel puts her hands on her lap, not her belly. Just pointing it out in case I miss something like Ambessa being pregnant again. After which we go back to Singed, who is now working on his fully funded experiments. And while he does so, his locket is there on the table to remind him that he's doing it for her. So he cuts open what seems to be a lizardy creature, and he extracts something purple from it, possibly teasing that is how Shimmer is made. And yes, that could also be related to all the experiments with Rio. In fact, we still have no idea what happened with that. I wouldn't be surprised if Rio was a mutation that had to survive, because his cells were duplicated to make these smaller lizards to make more Shimmer. But that's a pure conspiracy theory. You can also see that before the serum is made, he adds a few petals to it and distills it. And when he locks the container with this concoction, it turns from the shimmer purple into a light pink. This is important, and you'll see why in a moment. Which is when Caitlyn arrives, and she mentions the curious dismissal of a revered academy alchemist. She even mentions it was someone who was responsible for the creation of Shimmer, hinting that's exactly what Singed just did in this scene. Also remember, this is a reference to Season 1, where Singed told Victor that he used to be friends with Heimerdinger, but later they split because of their opinions. That's why he was dismissed. And after that, before the grand reveal, we get to see pieces of Singed's lab. The Merkwolf used to create Warwick was preserved in a jar. There is a weird rat which could be a continuation of the experiment from Season 1, and nope, I'm not sure what that is. There is also another beast in a jar with a basket on its mouth so it doesn't bite, and it has sharp mechanical claws. I think it's safe to say that was a previous attempt at Warwick, which is where we get 6 more jars hinting at previous experiments. One had an early version of the tube Warwick has in his body now. One is just feral, I guess. There is an amputated hand, referencing the mechanical claw. There is another beast that is just pumped with Shimmer. There is a jar with cut-off bestial ears. But more importantly, there is a head with exposed brain. And some people realized there is a really high chance that this is Deckard, the bully who got shimmered up in Season 1, who is technically the first Warwick experiment Singed ever did. But then, of course, Caitlyn calls Singed Dr. Revek, which is an unbelievably massive lore drop. For those of you who don't know, in League's universe, Oriana's father was always Corin Revek, a character who even appeared as a separate person in the Convergence game. So now, as all the hints towards Singed being Oriana's father poured in, everyone got curious because that would have to retcon a character from the past. So what Riot did is that they simply turned Singed into Corin Revek, which means somehow it is now Singed's job to turn his daughter into that. And after revealing this twist, Caitlyn calls him a monster, because he is primarily known for making Shimmer. When she asked why he was doing all of that, Singed holds the jar, mentioning it is for love. Again, referencing his daughter. But also he mentions that that is the reason why anyone does unspeakable things. Remember this line because it comes back at the very end. Now here, the shot reveals his blackboard, and here we got some notes on his experiments. Here are his first notes on the rats in the jars. There is a picture of a ribcage, showing us possibly where the tubes plug in into the spines. The valves for the tubes are above it. On the side we have the growth of a new bone, but most importantly, there is a picture of a pelvis, and something really long hanging below it. I'm pretty sure that is supposed to be Warwick's tail. So then we get one last shot in the lab. And here you can see the other massive failed experiments. So Warwick was definitely not the first attempt. And yes, there is also a massive red here. I wonder if Twitch gets eventually confirmed. And so Singed opens up the room of his daughter. Obviously, this room is full of Oriana references, including the dancing ballerina. Oriana herself is in the casket, and she is suspended in a mixture of green and pink liquids, with the green hinting towards what's happening with Warwick. Singed then mentions that perhaps in another life, Oriana and Caitlyn might have been friends. I wonder if this is foreshadowing of some weird time paradoxes that might happen eventually. Then he says that everything he had ever done was to cure her, after which he injects the jar into the casket, confirming the mild mixture of potential shimmer and flowers is what keeps Oriana alive. We can then see Singed sit down. This is where we get a better view of the room. And we can even see Oriana's ballet shoes and skirt, revealing that she was a dancer herself when she was a bit more alive. And lastly, when Mbessa asks what he is trying to cure, he simply says death. So it is possible Oriana already died, and he is just trying to figure out how to bring her back. The scene then goes back to Mel, where she is getting strange golden visions in the room, and she uses these visions to solve the puzzle. But then Kino kinda starts warping around, and it becomes more and more apparent that he is an illusion too. So Mel slams his head into the wall, and that seems to have done something to the puzzle. Now, in this moment, as we know, since LeBlanc has the power to take on the appearance of anyone, Kino starts shifting between the people we know. So here he turns into Mbessa, the girl she executed in the past, Elora, Mel herself, Jace, and even young Mel. And it stops at Mel with marks below her eyes, which reflect LeBlanc herself. But now that the truth is out, LeBlanc goes for Mel. And she is told that originally they thought that Kino was the special child, but then Mbessa traveled to Piltover and she brought the Black Rose with her, leading them to Mel. She also refers to Mel as a sister. This is likely done from the perspective of Kino, whom LeBlanc took on. I doubt that Mel is actually LeBlanc's sister or anything like that. But in this moment, the special power does come out, and once again Mel is saved by a flash of gold. And then we are back at Warwick scenting Isha's blood in the tunnels. After which, the shot goes directly to Isha, framed within Warwick's slash. Vi then kicks out the door and the sound lights up the room, which is where we are introduced to Silco's and Vander's original office in the mines. This is the reason Vander as Warwick went here in the first place. So, here we can see Vander's original gloves. So now we know that they are actually mining tools. This is why the Atlas gauntlets Vi has were supposed to be used by the miners too. It was just an upgrade. On the table we can see a glass. This is the same glass Silco always had in his office. And it is the same glass that also comes from the last drop bar. On the wall, Jinx notices two jackets. One has a V for Vander, the other one has an S for Silco. Also notice the badge on the jacket is different from the normal Piltover logo. It does have a pickaxe on it to indicate it is a miner's badge, but since the hex gates were not a thing yet, you can see the background of the logo is different from what we have in the modern days. If you're asking about the number, I have no idea what that reference is. And yes, Jinx finds comfort in the scent of Silco's jacket. Then they find the letter which Vander left behind for Silco, where Vander said that after she died, he lost his head. He tried to justify what he did to Silco, but the dirt was on both of their hands. This relates to something that comes up in a moment. But here, he mentions that they are both at fault. As he does that, the scene goes to Jinx and Vi as they face away from each other, indicating they are in a very similar position. But also, here they are directly mimicking Vander and Silco. Vi is Vander with the mining gloves, and Jinx is Silco sitting in his office. Also, back there on the wall, you can see the flag for what we believe to be the original flag of the nation of Zaun. It has the Z on it, the dominant color at the top is green, even though it does look bluish here, and it also has the iconic Eye of Zaun on it. And finally, Vander signed the letter with the words, blisters and bedrock. But then they leave the office and Warwick finds them. The first time we hear the howl, it zooms in on Isha, because her blood is what awakened the beast. So he charges in, and Vi stops him from leaping at Isha, which is where the fight begins. Here I want to point out this shot. Not only is this a parallel shot to how Vi took down the first man with the gauntlets, who happened to be Gustav, but also she destroyed Warwick's face, only for it to immediately regenerate back. This is what Sinch's experiments were hinting at in Act 1. So the two fight, there are a few shots where the hextech makes the body see-through, and you can see the bones and machinery inside. And there we also have a few possible parallels to Jinx's previous battle with Warwick, which also includes Jinx hesitating to shoot, and by the angle of the gun, she almost wanted to shoot Vi. For a second, he sees Powder again, and his eyes flash back to the blue and green of the Merkwolf. But the bloodlust is still strong, and so one of his eyes stays orange. In this shot, Vander is perfectly mimicking Silco, who also had a blue and orange eye. Vi then spits out blood, which makes Warwick rage even more, and you can see all the lines across his eyes, which are once again referencing the trail Warwick has in the game. But then Vi decides to trust Jinx. She believes it is Vander, and so this shot of the beast on her jacket goes into the real beast. And as Vi screams Vander, we get a flashback. We go back to the early days of the last drop, where their mother is playing a song. Of course, this is referencing the intros of the show. But Vander knows she only plays that song on special occasions, so he knows something is happening. So he pours 3 drinks for him, her and Silco, and here already you can see that their mother has Jinx's manners. Or rather, the other way around. But while the two are enjoying the mood, in the background, Silco is always working. And they drink to the fact that these two bozos managed to turn the underground into a healthy community. Which is where we get a close-up of young Silco. And yes, he does have Jinx's hairstyle. Which means he did style her hair after Powder became Jinx. And that's when their mother confirms she is pregnant. The moment Vander hears that, he takes away the alcohol and gives her a drink with a straw. The exact same one Vander used to give Powder. Now it all makes sense. We also learned that the father is called Connell. And from that point on, the two were dedicated to making Zaun work. Vander took more of a fatherly stance, and Silco stayed as a bit more of an organizer, which teases where their disagreement came from. It seems that as Silco and Vander led Zaun into a new home, Piltover might have disagreed with them forming a new nation, so Silco wanted to start a revolution to free Zaun, which likely means it was his decision to push Piltover over the bridge. And now of course we know that their mother died during the battle on the bridge. And that could have been why Vander is blaming Silco for her death. Yes, they were fighting for the nation of Zaun, but while Silco was fighting for the nation, Vander wanted to focus more on the people. And so they all toast with blisters and bedrock. Which is why we previously saw a darker flashback with the same toast. It makes sense why Vander would hate the words blisters and bedrock now. Or at least he did before he wrote the letter. And yes, Vander is the one who suggested the name Violet, which is how Vi got named. Also notice that during the conversation, her hair is tied back. But right before the toast, the front hair falls down, to mimic Jinx's hairstyle too. Now, before we move on, I have to pause for a moment to mention that this scene literally changed everything. The entire context of Season 1 is different now. Because now, after Silco found Powder, it wasn't just a random girl. There is no way Silco wouldn't know who she was. Especially after he previously saw Powder and Vi with Vander. So now it makes sense why Silco refused to give Jinx to Piltover. And that is why he was always so protective of her. It all circled back to blisters and bedrock. And that's where we get a bit of a reunion with the family. So, as Vander hugs Vi, Jinx joins in, since he is her dad too, just as Vi said, and Isha joins in as a younger adopted sister of Jinx, I guess. And that is where we get to the final scene of episode 5, where we are taken into the core of the Hex Gate. Here we have a figure taking out a power cell and walking out with it. You can see them leaving to the left of the screen, which mirrors how Jace originally came into this room in episode 3. But then the core goes crazy and Jace spawns in. Here's the important thing to mention. Here you can see there are multiple versions of Jace that are merging into one, likely meaning that the Jace we get now experience the past, the present, and the future. As they all merge, Jace drops down, revealing the twisted, corrupted hammer. Here, I have to point out, the core of this hammer looks extremely voidy, especially if you compare it to the gold and purple of the void in something like Icathia. You can also see that the gems Jace has now fused into his body, and it is revealed that he now has a leg brace. The crazy thing is, in-game, Victor is the one who always had that. So of course now, some people started some tinfoil hat theories. What I would like to mention, however, is that his leg brace has the handle of his original hammer. You can see that the new hammer doesn't have the reload mechanism, because now Jace is firing it using the magic of the fused stone, and instead the lever is used here. The first thing Jace does is that he sighs once he gets out. He doesn't seem confused, it seems he arrived here with a purpose. So then he meets Salo, who followed the advice of the spy and he got healed by Victor. But when Victor looks at him, he gets a vision that looks like this, which is where some really cool theories come in. It seems like Jace saw the future. He saw that what Victor is doing now may look great now, but over time, everything he healed is slowly turning into weird, voidy celestial mess. And so, in theory, it is possible Jace has his Terminator moment now. And he went back to the past so he could prevent that kind of future from happening. There are a lot of other details later on that also suggest that. Anyway, Salo then allows Victor to use his body to speak to Jace. And the moment Jace saw he was speaking with Victor, the shot zooms in on Jace clutching the hammer and dragging it along. It is clear from the moment he arrived, his mission was to kill him. So Victor then asks Jace to visit him, after which he gets him out of the Wild Rune, which is where Jace foreshadows what the future might look like. He said giving Hextech to the people was a mistake, because Hextech wasn't a miracle, it was a curse. Here, notice how when Jace is speaking, he is so cold his breath is a steam. But Salo is fine. Also, Victor then tells Jace that he seems different, that something happened. This is a direct quote used by Heimerdinger. This happened in Season 1 after Victor tapped to the hexcore for the first time. But then he also mentions that he could see Jace also touch the Arcane, kinda hinting that this is indeed a Jace from the future merging with the present. Which is where Jace told Salo he couldn't let him leave. Salo simply walked past him anyway, and you could feel the pain inside Jace, because he knew he had to do something evil. But it was all done for the greater good. So he apologizes and kills Salo. From that point on, there was no going back. And so we get to episode 6. This is where all the setups from the other 2 episodes are starting to pay off. Episode 6 starts with a scene that's actually the end of episode 6. We can see the weird celestial carnage, which now we know came from Jace's blast. And we got a coin spinning around with Victor saying, "I see it now." This could unironically be a tease that Victor saw what Jace was gonna do all along. But perhaps there is more behind this. First, we got a glimpse at dead Salo. And here we have a very important thing to mention. After Salo died, the purple in his eyes returned, which means Victor is not curing Shimmer. The Shimmer is still in their bodies. And if the Shimmer is based on the Void, it makes sense why eventually everyone turns into voidy zombies. It's because the corruption cannot be stopped. This then cuts into Victor witnessing what Jace had done. And we can see that he is somewhere in a celestial plane. This means, using Hextech and Shimmer, Victor tapped into the forces that are on the same level of someone like Soraka or Bard. Remember that magic in League of Legends has specific categories. We have spirit magic, we have elemental magic, and we have celestial magic. Anything else is usually a combination of these, with the void not being magic at all. The void is the exact opposite of existence. It is literally nothing. And now I wonder, since we still don't know where Hextech even came from, is it possible it is of celestial origin? If yes, then Hextech might be connected to the Rune Wars, because the world runes were originally scattered across Runeterra by a mischievous celestial. Anyway, that's it for my celestial lore tangent. The best detail here is, if you go back to when Victor started walking the first time, just have a look at the background. That's how it started. This is how it's going. Anyway, here we can see Victor mentioning that there is another will at work within Jace. And as he says so, Sky appears, revealing that that is the case for Victor too. Sky then mentions that she thought she had heard something just before the portal closed. This could be referencing the end of episode 3, where we can hear a voice talking to Jace, simply saying, "What have we done?" Here, the subtitles also mention that it is Jace's voice, but the voice just doesn't match. In fact, I would not be surprised if this was something like a future Victor. Anyway, looking at the anomaly, Victor calls it a sophisticated conjuration, something that's always self-replicating and self-destroying. As he says replicating, Sky splits out of him like a cell. But the destruction is yet to come, I guess. So next we get to Singed being rowed by a Noxian soldier away from Piltover and into Ambassa's ship. Meanwhile, Caitlyn is training with Ambassa. Here she is being taught the Noxian principles: vision, might, and guile. In a way, Ambassa is doing this to transform Caitlyn into a true Noxian. Now, of course, we know that Noxus is led by 3 leaders, each representing one principle. Vision is Swain, might is Darius, and guile is teased to be LeBlanc in hiding. This third person is still mysterious. Also, when Ambassa mentions guile, the scene goes to Rictus, who is taking care of his anti-magic rune enchants, which, as we know, should be linked to the Black Rose. But Ambassa then suggests that there is also a 4th principle: sacrifice. By saying this, she might be foreshadowing the fact that she wants to join the leadership of Noxus, but not while overtaking guile. She might want to introduce a new seed. Anyway, during this training, pay close attention to the choreography. I know I can't really show this with screenshots, but after Caitlyn loses the fight and she tries to surprise Ambassa, she gets smacked, slammed in the stomach, slammed in the shoulder, and thrown to the ground. Remember this specific moveset, there is a really cool detail around this later on. Anyway, as Ambassa explains the principles, she explains that they both understand sacrifice, and so they are kin, which is when the shot goes to Rictus, who is suspiciously looking back. He still doesn't trust Caitlyn. But then, Singed arrived with the news that he tracked Warwick down to Zone using his weird tracking device. So, that's where the scene goes next. We get to Vi, Jinx, Vander, and Isha visiting Victor's Utopia, where a lot of people with varying sicknesses are going here too, though most of these have some problems with limbs. Some can't walk, and there is even a visitor without an arm. And here we can see Huck is being the one who is welcoming people. Of course, Vi immediately calls him a traitor, because the last time they saw each other, Huck sold out Vi and Caitlyn to Silco for a bit of shimmer. Huck apologizes and says he's different now. And in the back, you may notice the little girl from the one scene where Heimerdinger performed a miracle in Season 1. Anyway, here we also learned that Victor is called the Herald by the locals. To enter, Huck asked them to surrender weapons. This was a place of peace. Vi knew this was their only way forward, so that's what they did. Interestingly enough though, here we get to see the other half of Jinx's gun. And for the first time I noticed, it is marked with the rune of domination on the other side. So with precision being the greater rune and domination the minor rune, that does make up a complete Jinx build. So, before they enter, Jinx pops the gem out of the pistol and leaves it behind. Which is where we get to a detail a lot of people missed. Isha just saw what Jinx did. And so, after looking at the gloves which Vi left behind, we can see a zoom in on the hextech pulsing within them. This is trying to foreshadow that Isha took the hextech gems out of the gloves, just like Jinx did it with her gun. This is why later she will have these gems in her pocket. In fact, for just a few frames in the next shot, you can see Isha putting something into her pocket. If you connect the dots, it should be obvious, that's the hextech gems. But of course we are not really supposed to notice it, because the seam is framed in such a way so we are supposed to look into the distance. That's a really clever trick by Fortiche. Here we then get some shots showing us that this place became a thriving community, and in a way, it is reflecting on how Silco and Vander built Zaun into its own place too. Which is where we get to the smiths who are crafting more of these arcs for the buildings. And the sizzle of the cooling angers Warwick, because now he's getting flashbacks of being tortured by Singed. Vi then quickly tries to cover Warwick back up again, but Huck stops her. This is because here, no one is ashamed of themselves. And in fact, after he does that, the other people just continue with their lives. And so, they arrive at the Herald. Which is when Victor meets Jinx and Vi for the first time in this entire series. What's interesting here is that if you look around Victor's body, that weird fuzz is not an artifact from the Bloom effect. There is actually a really faint magical aura that is around Victor, though it may be difficult to see. After which we get to this screenshot. Remember it for now. So Victor then comes closer and tries to heal Vander. On the frame of contact, we get this badass screenshot. And for a moment we can see Vander is still in there, but he is not really active. Instead, the beast is taking hold of him, which is what cast Victor out of his mind. But being a true scientist, Victor takes it upon himself to cure him at any cost. Also, for a few moments, we can see Victor's society also has a logo of their own. It is shown here on his badge. Also, notice how before Vander met Victor his face was clean. But after he tapped into his core, he got these marks on his face. Those are actually the fingerprints of Victor, and they are on every survivor's face exactly where Victor touched them. The cool detail on top of this cool detail is that during Echo's and Jesus' conversation, Echo called the wild rune a fingerprint. So next, the whole gang has a conversation. And I have to say, it is just so cool to see Victor interacting with the other characters of Arcane. Victor told Vi that Vander's score was simply bound to the beast. And he also learned Vander's name because he himself told him that. So at least a piece of Vander is still alive there. And Victor added that he saw Vander's dream of what Zaun could have been. He also promised he would try to do his best to cure him. But he had one condition. He asked Powder to stay and help with her inventions. The moment he said the name Powder, you can see Jinx flashed in blue. She then pulled on the well, and a cog came out of it and fell into the water. After which Victor fished it out, with this cog being the same one we saw in the intro of the episode. And it will come back at the end too. But yes, Jinx declined the offer, and Victor revealed that wasn't his condition. He just asked Vander to be restrained at night, because he knows what the beast can do. And so, they agree, which is where we get a quick run-through of what we can find in the village. Such as these birds, which a lot of people believe is a reference to Rakan and Zaya. I will leave them at that. But here, the cool thing to notice are these flowers. They are the same ones Victor tried to cultivate using the hexcore in Season 1. But there, the flower always quickly withered. Besides that, there is not much to mention here. Victor taps into Vander's core, and there, Victor and Sky look for the human side. For example, here we can see the human Vander on the left, with the rest being dominated by the beast. Also, you can see Victor and Sky here in one of the eyes. Then we see them walking into the beastly fortress across the bridge. Then there is a room that looks like something from Dark Souls, and every day Victor tries to power through it. And then they walk into his core. The moment Isha offers Vander some water, a bit of his human side appears inside the core. And so they pray that part open, and the awesome part is that as they do that, Vander actually starts to walk upright again. And we get more flashbacks from his past. Here we see Vander and Silco working as miners, we got them all together in the last drop, we got Vander after the bridge fight, because he has the scar on his arm visiting Banzo. Then we can see Connell, the father of Vi and Jinx, with their mother being pregnant with Powder. After that, they all formed their kids group with Milo and Clagger. Vander then showed Vi how to fight and protect the rest. But more importantly, this revealed that while their parents worked in the fissures too, Vander took care of Powder and Vi as he was trying to turn the fissures into the lanes. In other words, he was trying to turn the mines into a community. A cool detail here is that you can see the mining gloves hanging on the wall, just like how Vander used to hang them above the bar. And then their mother gives Vi one of the gauntlets to try them on. We then have their mother taking care of Powder too. We can see that she is styling Vi's hair, and the three just have a good old family time. But then we also get the scene where they get measured. This is awesome because this place was originally shown in Season 1, where Caitlyn and Vi accidentally ended up in their old house. This exact pillar was there. So after it transitions into the same pillar still being there in the present, this reveals this is the place beneath the original Eye of Zaun which Vi took down while escaping Silco. So in a way, this new utopia is being built as the new Zaun. So next, when they talk about the place and whether it would work, Jinx calls Victor a skinny tin machine herald, which is a reference to Victor's in-game title. And after they talk about the possibility of staying here together, the bird arrives and it kinda teases to be the bird of freedom, and how they would be free from all the Piltover and Zaun conflicts. However, the conflict always finds a way. And so next, Singed and the Noxians march into Zaun looking for Warwick. Here he is still using his weird compass, and after getting a closer look at it, it kinda hints as to how it works. At the bottom you have Shimmer and the green essence plugged in. Both of these cycle through Vander's body too. Singed then introduced a bit of his own blood into the loop. In fact, you can see that it is fresh blood that is being pumped in through the tubes, exactly like how he pumped his own blood into Warwick at the end of Act 1, and now the blood is attracted to the beast the same way the beast is looking for it. At least, that's the theory. I'm not sure how much thought Riot actually gave this. Anyway, then the Noxians arrive and it is revealed that they also have hooks. This is what Singed used before to constrain Warwick in the lab. However, you'll see that something else will be on this hook later on. As always, Huck asks for no weapons, which Noxians are not willing to do. And so, Singed goes forwards to talk to his former pupil, which Ambassa allows. And she orders the army to build a camp, after which she plants down a Noxian mark. This could be a really cool subtle reference to how Noxus functions. Anywhere the Noxian Empire expands, they build the Noxtora, which are gateways shaped like the Immortal Bastion. By following the roads with these gates, you always end up in the capital of Noxus. In a similar way, Ambassa just marked a small territory for the Noxian army. So next, we can see Victor still working on Vander, and inside his head, you can see he's mostly handling a human now, though his body still has these bestial features, which also include some extra faces and eyes. After which, he takes a break. And he notices Victor's own body is declining, which is when Singed arrived. Here he confirmed that Victor's power is finite, and every time he uses it, it diminishes. Of course, Singed is then curious about Victor's state, and so he kinda grabs Victor's hand. This moment is slightly awkward, so I wonder if this has any deeper meaning in Act 3. Anyway, because they touched, Victor could see Singed's past. So he saw that he was doing all of the questionable experiments because he is simply trying to beat the most natural thing: death. In this flashback, we can hear Singed reading a book to Oriana. The words here are: his quest led him astray of any trodden path. His own shadow dissolved to darkness. Now the only course was forward. The only warmth, a dream of her waltz. Obviously, waltz is mainly a reference to Oriana being a ballerina. But also, this really seems to be a take on the story of Viego, the Ruined King, where he's referencing thinking of his dying queen Isolde. And more to that, the cover of the book is really close to some of the icons found in the Blessed Isles. So Singed might unironically be reading the Ruination book to Oriana here. Now, after hopping out of this vision, Victor mentions that knowledge is a paradox, because the more you know you are ignorant. And as he says that, the shot goes to Victor holding the coin. Remember the fact that he is holding it here while talking to Singed. So next, the two talk about Vander. This conversation is kinda vague on purpose. It seems like all of this will definitely make sense in Act 3. But it seems like Singed is suggesting they should merge all of these things into Vander. Victor knows that this would destroy him, or at least the human inside. And he asked Singed if he wants to do it for the conquest of warbands, referencing Noxus. But Singed hints he is really doing it for humanity. After which, Singed says, "You must survive, Victor." A quote directly referencing how Singed said Rio must survive in Season 1. After which, Victor talks about fate, an invisible hand guiding them to a destination, by which he might be hinting he knows what's coming for him. But of course, Singed doesn't believe in that. He believes in evolution, but Victor argues that evolution has a destination too. As he said that, the scene goes to his body, hinting he believes this form is what all humans should have. And he further mentions that they shouldn't combat nature. In other words, they shouldn't defy death itself, which is what Singed wants to do, but rather they should supersede it. Now, after googling the exact definition of supersede, that is quite creepy. And yes, he calls this destination the final glorious evolution. That's right, he said the thing. For all the Arcane fans, this is his famous quote from the game. And so, at the end of this conversation, Victor refuses to sacrifice humanity for Singed's cause. And before he leaves, Singed mentions that Victor probably knows that if he dies, this community dies with him, foreshadowing what's about to come. So then, Vi follows Singed out of the camp, going past the Noxian mark. And soon she gets ambushed by Caitlyn, which is where I hope your memory pays off. A smack in the face, a hit in the stomach, a hit in the shoulder, thrown to the ground. If you play this scene frame by frame, it is precisely identical to the move Mbessa used on Caitlyn during their training. Anyway, at first the two go hard on each other's past again. Then Vi mentions Cupcake, and a bit of emotion gets involved. Just don't tell Vi about Maddie, I guess. So next, Caitlyn fills Vi on what Noxus wants to do here. Vi fills Caitlyn on what she wants to do here, and together they come up with a plan to stop Noxus and save her dad. Caitlyn will pretend to bring Vi in as a prisoner, which will be a distraction for Caitlyn to take down Singed. As that happens, Jinx will have the task of protecting Caitlyn, which she would hate. So next, the scene cuts into a Noxian camp. This is the first time I ever thought about how Singed can actually chew through that meat. And in the background we can see Mbessa's ceremonial coat. Here, Singed tells Mbessa that Victor wants to save the man inside the beast, which would make him useless to them. And so he mentions he can make a serum that would prevent the humanity from coming back. After which, Caitlyn brings in Vi. This is where she looks at Rictus, and Rictus, once again, looks back in a suspicious way. But then Vi gets pushed in, and at the same time, Jace arrived at the village. And for a second, we can see the gem pulsing with magic. Back in the camp, Mbessa is glad to see Caitlyn turn Vi in. But she also sends Rictus out, listening to his suspiciousness. Meanwhile, in the background, Singed made the serum, which has a similar color to the liquid he's giving to Oriana. And while he did this, he let his own blood drain into a big glass container, which he then swung over his shoulder and walked out, saying, "It is time." A silly quote Singed also has in the game. Caitlyn then leaves her rifle behind and leaves too. The container with the blood is then hung on the hook, so that the dripping blood would wake up Vander, which is exactly what happened. So next we get a cut to Jinx, who tasked Isha with sneaking her gun into the settlement, and she succeeded. Which is where Jinx gets a sentimental talk about her being happy that Isha is in her life, totally not foreshadowing anything. She then sees Caitlyn and Singed walking in on Vander, and so Jinx gets ready to shoot, as was part of the plan. Back in the Noxian camp, being a proper villain, Mbessa told Vi how she was able to manipulate Caitlyn. And she's ready to get rid of Vi using this blade, which is actually just a Noxian butcher's knife which they use to cut the meat. And Mbessa mentions that Caitlyn must not be distracted. A reference to how she didn't want to be distracted with Mel, so she sent her to Piltover. So Vi then has a really cool monologue. Mbessa looks at Caitlyn's rifle, and if you're wondering why the scene keeps zooming in at this part of Caitlyn's rifle specifically, that's because this is the net launcher, and it is missing the cartridge. This is what it looks like once it is being fired. Don't worry if you didn't know about that, because this net was literally fired only once in the entire series. And it was in a music video. So, Vi breaks out, she dodges the blade, and we get a flashback to what happened. Here we can see Caitlyn giving her the net, they fake all the bruises, and this almost reminds me of a Spider-Man movie. Anyway, Vi uses the net to catch Mbessa. And back at Vander, while Singed was getting ready to apply the serum, he got taken down by Caitlyn. And then we got back to Jace sneaking in. Here, the further he goes, the stronger his freaky visions are. And there is a voice in his head that keeps repeating, "I won't fail." If you ask me, I wouldn't be surprised if this was future Jace promising it to Victor, which would be him promising that he wouldn't fail killing him in the past. And so he walks through the village and he sees everyone as these weird alien zombies. Again, I think that this is the fragment of his future self still seeing what is gonna happen in the future. And yes, all of these still look very voidy. So this vision also pops up on other citizens, after which he also gets this vision, which is a really interesting one. Because this is obviously a corrupted human being holding a staff or something. In my opinion, could be one of two things. Either this is future Victor, because in the back you can see it has a weird voidy mask, but also this could be Jace's own future, because he does hold this pose when he's holding down the hammer. Regardless, I think this is their destiny in another future. What's even crazier is that in the next frame right after that, we get this shot. This is a cloaked figure holding a hand in the front. Now, where have we seen this? That's right, the mage. The crazy theory here being that Victor, or at least the future version, was actually the mage who saved Jace. Anyway, Jace then gets more creepy visions, and he almost kills a kid. But he stops, and the kid takes him to Victor. Here, it is entirely possible that through the kid's eyes, Victor could be taking Jace to himself. Also here, inside the hammer, we can see what the corrupted hextech gem looks like. So, Jace walks in, and once again, you can see he just knows what he has to do. And once again, the same framing of this place comes back. Inside, Jace is shocked to see Victor. This could be because he hasn't seen his friend in a decently human form in a while, especially if that turns out to be Victor. And he can see how Victor is now linked with the Arcane and this entire place. The really cool detail here being that Victor is still wrapped in the blanket Jace gave him in episode 1. Now, back at Vander, Rictus surprised Caitlyn, which reveals that he was sent here by Mbessa after his original suspicions. But then Jinx jumps in to save her, which is ironic given the fact that Caitlyn almost killed her the last time. However, the Hextech blast gets absorbed by the Keenik Rukern. In this scene, we can hear a light instrumental cover of the Get Jinxed video. And really, this is just about the most anime fight we've had in Arcane. It is just power against speed. But eventually, he catches her, and this time Vander is the one who saves her. When he stands up, you can see that Vander is actually standing on his hind legs like a human now. Which is also why he's able to speak out the words, "Don't touch my daughter." So yes, Rictus gets knocked out. Here notice that even though he drew blood, Vander is still not bloodthirsty. A proof that he's becoming a human. And so a second family reunion happens, this time with Caitlyn watching from a distance. Meanwhile, at Victor's house, Jace has to save them all. And so he charges the hammer with the stone in his hand. And once again, we get Jace's own voice saying, "I won't fail." In this scene, you can see that the present Jace is not even looking at Victor. But a different version, perhaps a future fragment committed to the task, is. And once he fires, you can see 5 versions of Jace charging up at the same time. This is likely why this blast was so much stronger. And yes, it was a direct hit on Victor, and it blew a hole in the ceiling. Which gives us the same framing as before, except now everything is awful. And so, that's where we get the same shots from the beginning of this episode. Just alien pieces floating around. But this time, in the background, you can almost hear time rewinding. When we get a zoom in on Victor, we can see his chest was blown out. So Jace did destroy the hexcore. And after Victor dies, he drops the coin. The same coin he held when he was talking about fate. The same coin that appeared at the very beginning of this episode. And it is one that is yet to come back one more time. Outside, all the cured people now fall, and their shriek almost hints their soul leaving their body. At the same time, Vander, now Warwick again, is fully out of control, with the liquids inside his body turning into hot mush. This is the point Vander truly died, and in that moment, everyone knew it. The first victim of this was, of course, Rictus. Ambassa then arrived. She noticed that Caitlyn betrayed her and that her advisor died. So she called for a charge. The scene then fades black and Victor says, "I understand now. The doctor was right." Not only is this referencing the conversation they just had with Singed, but this is also a callback to Victor visiting Singed when he was trying to save Rio. Here, Victor said the exact same line. During this monologue, we get flashes of the war, but also Singed flashes on the screen, revealing he successfully applied the serum, destroying Vander's humanity, which is what Victor says here too. Next, when he talks about their very essence, it goes to Vi and Jinx referencing their evolution, carrying the essence of Vander and Silco. When he mentions emotions, it goes to Caitlyn, who was a bit of a roller coaster. When he mentions rage, it goes to Ambassa, who lost Rictus. Compassion then goes to Rictus himself, and hate being separated onto Ambassa. Victor mentions these emotions are two sides of the same coin, which is where we can see the coin spinning, one side clean, the other corrupted. In the battle, Vice gets sliced across her stomach. Caitlyn runs in to help her, and Jinx rushes to Vander to calm him down, but it doesn't work. After getting knocked down, after realizing no one can help, Isha goes in to save her. She opens the pocket and picks up the 2 gems she took from Vi's gauntlets. And as she rushes to Jinx, we get more flashbacks. Them dancing at the soundbox that Jinx previously shot. Isha realizing she would like to have blue hair just like her. Them painting the bugs. And then they jump over Zorn. A parallel shot of Vi doing the same thing in Season 1. Except now, Jinx was teaching her younger sister how to do it. Then she dyed Isha's hair after she won the bug battle. The two sprayed the streets of Zorn, they performed their special greeting, which they did in the previous episode. We get a snippet of Jinx actually making the mechanical finger. In the first frame here, you can see that Isha is a little devil, and they leap into the waters below the bridge. And then, in the battle, she zips past Jinx. She picks up the gun, which is still primed with Jinx's gem. Her head falls off, fully taking on the persona of Jinx as powder. And she slams another gem into the already primed pistol. You can even see how the gems are squeezed in the chamber. Jinx realizes what she's doing, but then she slams in the third one, finally fully overcharging the gun. And with that, with one last gesture to remember Jinx, she points the gun up at Warwick's head. She smiles and gets annihilated together with Warwick. The last remnant of Jinx's sane side vanishing. During this explosion, Vi protects Jinx with her own body. And the scene ends, with Vander being taken down by the combined power of both Jinx's and Vi's weapons. The last words in Act 2 belong to Victor, with the coin rolling in for the 3rd time. That which inspires us to our greatest good is also the cause of our greatest evil. Just like what Singed said back in the lab.